the most efficient way to achieve what you want is by letting it happen by itself. You're actually using divine will or outer intention. Reality is a mirror that reflects your attitude to it with a delay. In this material realm, we take on a certain identity called the ego. This current identity or persona that we're embodying is a mask that we're wearing. When we take off that mask, there is a formless awareness that exists beyond the mask. The pure beingness that is uncolored. If you give yourself permission to be who you are meant to be, the goals that you'll achieve are going to be beyond what you could have conceived. The world is, as the yogis would call it, Maya. It's an illusion. There's a dual nature to life. For normal people, there is good karma and bad karma. For the serious spiritual seeker, any karma is bad. There's three main types of karma. One of the deepest teachings or lessons that I learned this year was it's because of how we as a society have been conditioned. There are obviously powers that be that want to capitalize on your attention. Attention is the number one thing they can monetize. And so there are agencies or there's a book on this I read called Reality Transurfing. In it, the author calls these pendulums, or in other schools of thought, they're called egregores. These collective like-mind structures, they spontaneously form. They resonate at one particular energy level and they extract the energy of the adherents. So if you have religious, political, sports organizations, the followers, they resonate at a particular energy. And so society has kind of taken on that energy and keeping people in that. And anyone who strays away from that gets kicked out of the tribe. So back in the day, when we were very, very tribal, people would do anything to not get cast away from the tribe, because then you'd be left to wither away and die by yourself. And so people are very, very afraid, and there are certain things that are taboo because we have the ego conscious self has established that this is the way to be. Anything else is bad, and that gets suppressed into our shadow. If people live in, like I come from, you and I, we come from, I don't know your heritage, but I come from a brown family, and doctor, lawyer, engineer is the only way to go.
Or failure. Or failure. Sorry, that was...
Right. Yeah. Doctor, lawyer, engineer, or you fail. But the question of, if I wanted to go to my parents and be like, you know what, I want to take an arts degree. I want to pursue a degree in, art or music. They would have a panic attack, right? So it's just like that part of us gets it gets suppressed into the shadows. And so different societies have different goals or different pendulums that are predominant. But in our society, it gets very, very like this hard work, grind, don't think about mindset. It's all woo-woo, it's all bullshit. That mindset stuff has gotten suppressed into the shadows. But I think throughout the 70s and 80s, there has been a resurgence. And now we're starting to see, like in 2020, going forwards, a resurgence in people waking up and becoming more conscious. So that's always exciting to see.
Yeah, it's really interesting seeing, especially, I don't know how you take this being an online creator, because on some level, I've been following your work for actually many, 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 many years. And like it continues to grow exponentially. And even like being a much smaller creator in my own space, it's obviously you're doing more work, so naturally the work is going to grow. But then there is this sort of as within, so without, watching the appetite of like the world sort of shifting as well. Do you reflect upon that in terms of, people's appetite for what was previously suppressed or previously fringe becoming more mainstream now? And why do you think it is that more and more people are cluing into the importance of mindset in today's world?
Yeah, you can kind of understand that through just looking at the political landscape and how the left is shifting further left, and what was once right is now more left. What's considered conservative now would probably be considered liberal back in, 10 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah, we were saying this, the right starts to look a bit central when
exactly.
The left goes so left.
Now, but then, it's going to move, like society is like a pendulum, right? It's like the swing of a pendulum. It goes all the way to the left, then it comes all the way to the right, then there's a short period of time when it actually stays at the central balanced point. And there's a great book on this called The Fourth Turning, and how the human life is around 100 years old, and all the cycles in humanity, they're all 100 years old. And so it's in 25 to 30 year increments that we see big changes happen, big wars happen, um, big pandemics, epidemics happen. So I believe that happens because there's just this inherent, our society, I don't think any animal that's, we're the most intelligent beings here that we know of, and we live 100 years, so everything is tailored around that 100-year cycle. So we see these big shifts happen within 100-year cycles, and so everyone's going to live through a war or two, or a big financial disaster or two. That's bound to happen.
Going back to what you were talking about, not the pendulum swinging about through the ages for politics and stuff like that, but actually the pendulums and the aggregors that you were referring to before, that's really fascinating. I also, because I do follow you online, found that this year alone you invested almost like 250K into your
Yeah.
personal development, putting yourself in different spaces, different circles, amongst different people. What I subconsciously drew in my mind is that potentially we, like, as much as we become aware of pendulums, it's probably not something we can escape to some degree, right? You've just got to, like, we had Tom Bilyeu, Impact Theory, on the podcast the other day, and his whole channel, Impact Theory, has been dedicated to helping people exit the matrix. And I just asked the question, how do we exit the matrix? And he's like, unfortunately, you've just got to create your own matrix, is the only real way. And I was like, what? And so is that similar in this pendulum aggregor kind of space? It's like you're always going, as much as you want to like leave them, the only way to really engage with them is to participate in the ones that matter most to you, that are aligned to you.
Yeah, I think Tom Billy is really, really smart when he said that, because when you create, the only way to escape the influence of pendulums is to create your own pendulum. Like that's just how it is. And the way you create your own pendulum is by you walking your own path, by you getting cast out of society and having the courage to walk your own path, to do your own thing, kind of like you've done with this channel. And then what happens is, when you walk your path for long enough and you have enough conviction in it, the pendulums have no choice but to make you its star. And then you have your own adherence. You get placed at the forefront and you have adherence. So pendulums aren't always a bad thing, because there's always constructive pendulums and destructive pendulums. Constructive pendulums are pendulums that extract your energy and deliver you to your goals. Destructive pendulums, junk food, drugs, pornography, etc., are the ones that extract your energy and don't really deliver you to your goals, or don't really add any benefit to your life. So it's just about being conscious about which pendulum I am giving my energy to. So, with my channel, when I decided to walk my own path, the pendulums decided to put me at the top, and now I'm fortunate enough to be able to share this message with people and have adherence of my own. So, that's kind of how I understand it to work.
You also speak a lot about our frequency being above courage being one thing and below courage being another thing. Is that kind of an easy way to sort of visualize that? Actually, not that everybody needs to be in a pendulum forming space, but like I'm more likely to step into or create constructs that are more aligned to me if I'm above courage. But that courage piece is actually kind of hard, because you've actually got to face your fears, right?
You know, yeah, that's interesting you bring that up, because I was going to go into that. When the most destructive pendulums are, there's like a resonant frequency in the human realm, which is at the level of 170. So David R. Hawkins was the person to make this concept mainstream. And he talks about the levels of energy, and it's on a logarithmic scale from 0 to 1,000. And at the level of 200 is the neutral level, the level of courage, where it's neither positive nor negative, but it's life affirming. At 200 and above, the energy, the frequency that we have is life affirming. At 200 and below, the frequency that we resonate at is life destructive. So he talks about the concept of power versus force. Force is a taking energy, power is a giving energy. At above 200, you're at the level of power. Below 200, you're at the level of force. If you look at the destructive pendulums in society, the resonant frequency at which they can extract the most energy from us is around 170, 150, those levels. Because at 150 to 170, you reside at fear, anger, pride. At these levels, it's very, very easy. Like you have sufficient enough energy that you can be mobilized to do things by the puppet masters, right? So they can make you go to war. They can make you take very, very violent action. But if you go too low in levels to the level of, 10 to 50, you're more at despair, more at apathy, more at guilt. You can't be mobilized. You don't have enough energy to be mobilized to do anything. You're very zapped of energy. But then past 200, destructive pendulums can't get a hold of you because now you have discernment. Above courage, you have discernment to know what is life supporting and versus what is life threatening. And because of that discernment, you can choose which pendulum you give your energy to. Right? So yeah, that's one of the most interesting things I've discovered over the last 5 years researching this.
Hey there, Inspired Soul. Just wanted to take a quick sec to thank all of you that are subscribed to the channel. Thank you so much for your incredible love and support. To all of you that haven't yet subscribed, please do take a moment, hit the subscribe button just below. As I'm saying the word subscribe, it's lighting up in the colors of the Inspired Evolution behind me. Please hit that subscribe button below, hit the bell notification icon. It powers and empowers everything we're doing here, promoting love, positivity, and wisdom around the world. Thank you so much in advance for your support. I don't want to say this and I don't want to bring this into the conversation, so I'm going to, which conspiracy theories, because also when and part of me is like, oh, you're gonna go there, Amrit? Sorry, anyway, just honor it, because they also vibrate at quite a low frequency. And I went through a period where it actually started for me, where I was trying to understand the nature of, and this was way back when I was getting my first paycheck, going into engineering, first job, and started realizing, money is this thing that a lot of people are doing, trading all of their time for. And a lot of them, people are doing things that they're not, and I wasn't happy doing what I was doing at the time. And I was feeling into that and trying to understand the source of money and all this. And on the pursuit of it, you start to understand the way the banks are structured, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like, whoa, not all of this is, super supportive as one would be led to believe. And then you think about, how it's not backed by anything anymore to some degree, and it's more just energy than actually being pinned to something like gold. And then you think about people actually taking their lives over debt and stuff, and it starts to get pretty dark pretty fast. But that is somewhat reasonable. It was a pursuit of truth, But then after that, watching, you start in the pursuit of truth. I ended up down this rabbit hole where I was watching stuff that had nothing to do with really anything, and I couldn't actually discern. It was interesting because I was on the pursuit of truth, and then I was trying to look for more truth, and I ended up down these rabbit holes where I wasn't able to actually access a lot more truth. I was actually just getting more and more confused. The word is actually dissociated. I ended up significantly dissociated, and I had to take a step back from everything. But one of the realizations I had is a lot of conspiracy theories actually feed off your energy, touch wood. And now that we've got this conversation around pendulums, it actually makes it really easy to be able to have that conversation, which I've never actually been able to have as cleanly as we are at this particular juncture in the podcast. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember having those too, especially when you get in those Reddit rabbit holes. Reddit is where most of the conspiracy theorists are. But what I notice is the conspiracy theories, they have their particular frequency, level of energy that they vibrate at. And it's definitely always below 200. And it's around those levels of 150 to 175. And I guess it's the reason you resonate with conspiracy theories at a particular point in your life and it kind of emotionally triggers you is because within you there's a part of you, you're holding on to a part of you that fully hasn't come up to the level of 200 and above. Otherwise, if you were fully loving and you were fully trusting, you wouldn't be interested in conspiracy theories. So that too is valuable insight in that there is something that needs to be worked out. And I had a very deep realization earlier this year when I was very, very attached to my business. And anything that happened to my business affected me personally. And I remember waking up at 3, 4 a.m. just panic attacks. Oh no, I don't know what's going to happen. There's so much uncertainty. And that's when I, had to do a lot of shadow work to understand that, hey, this business is not me. Like, even though this is like my baby, I spent the last 4 or 5 years working on it. It's still not me. It's something that I happen to own, right? So, you know, there is there's a word people use called detachment, which is an unconscious unattachment. But then there's another word called unattachment, where you choose to pursue this thing, but you choose to not become attached to it. So I've been teaching myself how to pursue something with full involvement, but unattach myself from the outcome. And the only way that can be done is if you love the game so much that you would play it for free, because you just get good feeling from playing the game.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, I just want to double click on that for just one sec, because I noticed even myself on the journey of being a content creator, sharing things online, there is so much data, feedback, analytics, and stuff like that. And especially when you're running a business, coaching people, there is so much data, feedback, analytics on that sort of stuff that you can sort of become outcome driven. And now I can see it one for one. It's almost binary. The minute I focus on outcomes, my happiness is like evading me.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I attach myself to process, it's like, let's just have a really good conversation. It's like, yo, like I'm back. Like it's so binary. It's like, but then the outcomes, and I love how you delineated that, because detachment being unconscious, whereas unattachment being like this conscious way of weaving, hey, like I know I'm invested in this, but I'm going to unattach.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those subtle nuances for those that are tuning in, that's like those subtle shifts, like all these little 1% tweaks. Every time I watch a Quazi video, I get like 1% tweaks that shift so much for me every time I tune in, that they're worth their weight in gold. So just wanted to highlight that, brother. So we were talking about frequencies. Let's shift it, because conspiracies obviously has us below the 200. The law of becoming, Brother Bear. So this is something that you speak to, and for me is deeply, deeply fascinating. It includes our sense of self, as always evolving. Obviously, the inspired evolution has this frequency of, the law of becoming as well. What does it mean for people that are stuck right now? How can that, how is it important for them to see themselves as ever becoming? How do you describe the law of becoming, and why is it important for people to understand?
There's three main paradigms of existence. The lowest paradigm is the having paradigm, when you're solely focused on what you can take. And if you, like you described, when you're focused on the outcome, it's like a it's a taking energy. It's a win-lose kind of thing. It's like it's never enough. Nothing I have is ever enough, because I just keep wanting more, and my appetite, it's just endless. So that's the having paradigm, when the focus is solely on what can I have, what can I take. A level above that is the doing paradigm, where you focus on doing something, typically in order to have. You now have more autonomy over your life. You're more of a creator of your reality, because you take matters into your own hands. Whereas at the having level, you feel more like a victim. Like, hey, I want this, but I can't have it because only those who are born into privilege can have it. I was at this paradigm before I ever thought about quitting my job and starting my business, because I thought people who were wealthy because they had the right connections, or they were born into the right families, also right connections, and they inherited a ton of wealth. Never did I think it would be possible for someone to, start their own business and like become wealthy without any of those, like, luck, right? Like I would think, oh, the people who did those are just lucky, or they're just super smart, and I don't have any of that. And so it's just like a measuring stick. Like, I'm not this, I'm not this. You're comparing yourself to a standard, which again makes you fall prey to pendulums. Anyway, a level above that is doing. The highest level is being. When we consciously embody a version of ourselves, the doing takes care of itself. And then when the doing takes care of itself, the having also takes care of itself. So those things don't even need to be the focus anymore. The focus becomes being and who I am becoming. So it's like the big domino. Once you knock it over, everything else knocks over as well. Unfortunately, though, one of my earliest epiphanies was that there is a big difference between techniques and principles. And I learned this in the dating world. You can say a pickup line, or you can say a line in sales that you've learned through a fancy script from maybe an Alex Hormozy video that you watched, right? But if you're not saying it with if the right person's not saying it, it won't matter, right? It's not about what is being said, it's about who is saying it. If you said hi to a girl versus if Brad Pitt said hi to a girl, the results will be very different, right? It'll be very, very drastically different because it's the who that's saying it. Now, you don't need to be Brad Pitt, but if you assume the identity of someone who feels so good within their own bodies, they feel so great about themselves, they just want to share that greatness. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Quazi. Your energy is just going to be, it's just going to be so like, not stifled, like, hi. People can feel energy. So human beings have evolved over the last 300,000 years, right? And in the majority of those 300,000 years, we haven't had spoken language. It's a new thing. We've had subcommunication. So we have adapted evolutionarily to understand subcommunication. So energy prevails over anything else. So my focus is on like, what's the energy? What's the feeling? Feelings have allowed us to evolve to the level that we have come to. Not just logic. Logic is like a new construct. I think like this, and I could be totally wrong. The prefrontal cortex, the development of it is fairly new, right? So, in understanding that, it's like when you become the right person, you automatically embody the right energy, and when you embody the right energy, everything else takes care of itself. So why not focus on the thing that makes everything else irrelevant?
Yeah, well, I mean, for most people, I imagine it's so entrenching just chasing after the havings, and they're so busy in the doings that even taking time to pause and reflect on the being is seems like a luxury.
Yeah, no, it is. It does seem like a luxury, but the thing is, those are the people who need to do it the most. Because I think it's just, think about what you're sacrificing not thinking about those things. Oh, that's a luxury. Well, if you can afford, this is the luxury. You staying stuck here and not doing the hard thing, which is thinking about consciously what you want to create in your life. That is the luxury. Because if you don't sacrifice for your dreams, then your dreams become the sacrifice. Because if you keep on going on like this laziness in not thinking deliberately about the next moment, that's a luxury now.
Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally, and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines. And
he's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing. And Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him, and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate, because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach @Transurfing.com/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately, one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive. And yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. We get pretty deep in this channel, and one of the conversations we've had previously is with a beautiful brother, Bayo Komalafa. He's from Africa, and he teaches a lot of incredible things. He actually lives in India, beautiful brother. And he talks a lot about becoming as this overarching force that is driving the universe at large. And we had a really interesting conversation. I couldn't really find myself placed in the conversation to some degree because I've been a meditation teacher in my past, right? And so for me, being is such a massive part of, what we're discussing here today. But when we were having the conversation with him, being and becoming were not actually interchangeable in one and the same. There is a difference between your being. So it's interesting because we're talking about the law of becoming, but then there's also your being. Your thoughts on those two different, I don't want to call them states, but two different energies and how they sort of interplay with one another, stepping into being and becoming, and how becoming seems a bit future oriented, being becomes a bit present tense oriented. Your thoughts on the dynamics between all of that?
In this material realm, we take on a certain identity in order to function. And that identity is what's called the ego. And the ego is kind of like a shadow, not the shadow persona archetype, but it's kind of like a shadow because we have different personalities or identities based on the person that we interact with. Right now we're having this conversation. There's a particular persona I embody. When I have a conversation with my parents, I'm a son to them. There's a particular personality that I embody. When there's a conversation I have with my clients, my wife, particular persona, identity that I embody. Beyond all of those personas and identities, there is the I am, the pure beingness that is uncolored, that is transparent. When this transparent I am, the quality of attention or witnessing, there is an object placed in front of it, it becomes the object because it's transparent. Right? So because of that, we can function in this world. Unfortunately, though, for most people, the distinction between witness I am and I am this, there's no separation. Therefore, there is suffering. If I am this, I will always suffer because this is temporary. But if I am, and this is simply happening, and there's always a distance between the two, that is the end of suffering. This body will pass. This mind will pass. Everything, this is a loan that I've taken from the earth. This too shall pass. But this I am, this witnessing always was. Even when you were 4 or 5 years old, when you could witness and have that sense of awareness, that same awareness was, that same awareness is, simply the body has changed. Right? The body has just changed. And it always will be. And that awareness and watching that is within me is the same as it is within you. We have that same witnessing. However, different bodies, different personas, the world is, as the yogis would call it, Maya. It's an illusion. And it operates in yin and yang, black or white, and dual. There's a dual nature to life. And so to traverse through this duality, one of the greatest lessons I had to learn is life isn't black or white. There's always a gray area. There is no one absolute truth here. Not in this material world. There is one absolute truth. I am. There's existence. Everything else is relative to it. So as long as we deal with matters of this world, we choose to embody an identity that's something that's been chosen, that's been cultivated. Now, the identity that we cultivate, it is preferable that it matches our karmic destiny. So when we get deeper into that, you understand that there are certain tendencies that this character has that is really difficult to fight against. You know how they say there is nature versus nurture? It's best when we nurture what is in our nature instead of fighting what's in our nature. Like, for example, if you're an analytical type, it would be futile to try to mesh you into a non-analytical, more of an artistic type. That's not your natural tendency. That's not the womb that you're born in, you know, like the kind of body that you've taken up, the soul that's taken on this body. That's not, you know, like, but the I am is beyond all of that. So there's different layers to all of this stuff. And only when I like look at, like, study yogic teachings, read the Upanishads, you know, read all these texts, I could sort of understand it, but also just combine that with experience. Like so when people say like, oh, is free will real? Or is there free will, or is it all fate? Both. It's both. There is free will within fate. There is fate within free will. There is no one absolute truth. They're all true. Right? So everything is just, it's all relative. There's no one ultimate model of reality. They're all true. And so with like every single conspiracy theory, it's just like a matter of time when it becomes real. Like when Jules Verne wrote 30,000 Leagues Under the Sea, this was way before that was even a reality. Few short, like, you know, a couple centuries later, or maybe a century later, they made the submarine. They really went 30,000 leagues under the sea. So, you know, everything is just, anything that's fiction is just a matter of time until it becomes nonfiction. So it's all real. It just hasn't come into manifestation or fruition yet.
I do want to talk more about the free will thing. However, just for a moment, you referenced to the I am being transparent. I think that was a really profound metaphor for myself to receive. And then we take on the color of the object that we perceive, and collectively doing that, hence the Maya. In the three core principles you teach around understanding the law of becoming, the first one is authenticity, and I think you spoke to it earlier as well. Authenticity seems a bit slippery at this point for myself, when authenticity is then, but you're transparent. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Authenticity seems to usually be something that you're grounded in on. But then when you're transparent, how do you connect to authenticity? Is that, or do you connect to the transparent self?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Have you ever looked into Nisargadatta Maharaj?
Yeah. Love his teachings.
You know
and
how
his
he's like
one-liners are just, anyway, sorry.
They're insane. But you know how he's like one of the greatest sages, and he talks about the jnani, or like the witnessing. But the guy, he's a chain smoker. Like, he smokes cigarettes. That's part of his personality. And when
I did not know that. I did not know that.
He died of cancer. Like, he died of cancer because he just never quit smoking. But he was one of the greatest sages, probably calibrated around like the level of Jesus, Zoroaster, Prophet Muhammad.
I don't want to jump in because I know you're about to make a point, but actually, I'm sorry, so rude. I'm so comfortable with you. I'd never do this. But one of the things I noticed actually in Indian sages, some of them actually have this frequency where, like, there was a sage that I was also watching, and he had this thing where, like, in the middle of his teachings, he would leave and he would go speak to his wife in the kitchen, what's for dinner, and then he'd bring himself back. And then his wife was super embarrassed because he's like this uber sage and vibrating at a super high frequency, and then he would just check out for dinner and come back, and she was like, "You're a little child, like, what are you doing?" And then, you know, she encouraged him to stop doing that. He stopped doing that. He checked out of his body. Like, he was just like, well, there's nothing else worldly left for me to connect into, and he just was like, see ya.
Yeah, it's funny because in that story, that was part of, so for sages who are enlightened like that, you need something to build karma. Like, that's building karma.
You almost need a vice to keep you tethered to the
Because if you don't have enough karma, you just leave your body. Like, you just transcend. There's not enough karma to burn. And that's why we come to this earth, because we have a karmic propensity to burn. And that's why we talk about this concept of authenticity, right? So for him, he was being authentic to what he felt in the moment to keep him grounded, right? If your goal is transcendence, then obviously the path is a little bit different for you. But we can't you can't just I mean, not that I know of, but you can't sidestep and take shortcuts. You came here to enact a particular destiny. And until that realization occurs to you that that doesn't need to be enacted, or whatever needs to be worked out has been worked out, it will always keep coming back to haunt you. So, if I'm someone who is hell-bent on becoming a world-class musician, perhaps in my previous life I've tried to and I died not having that desire fulfilled. And because I died with an unfulfilled desire, I've taken on this particular body, this particular womb. That is my, I believe it's Parabdha karma. There's 3 main types of karma, but Parabdha is like the current allotment of karma that you have. Because of that quality of karma, I've taken on this particular womb, this particular body, and this particular time to incarnate into existence. So when we speak of authenticity, we're talking about this karma. What needs to be enacted right now? So going back to the story of that sage, it doesn't matter what happens. He's not trying to control his life. He's not interested in life. He has transcended life. He is that I am. And so if the body feels like smoking, the body smokes. As long as something he's doing is not causing harm to other people, even though it's causing harm to himself, right? It's still causing harm. So again, there's a lot of things that I don't fully understand. So this is from my understanding how these sages operated. And sometimes you hear about sages like Osho, right? Some people think he's a great sage. Other people think he's a villain. Like, why do you have all these fucking like Rolls Royces? And he took advantage of people. At the end, did he enlighten or did he not? Who knows? Like, it's just like a who knows kind of thing. But he claimed to be enlightened, and even enlightened sages have these tendencies that keep their karma, that keep them rooted to physical reality. Otherwise, they would just dissipate. Like they would leave their bodies.
So there is some element of persona that is always going to be present and at play. And so the authenticity piece there is for us to really connect into who we're fundamentally meant to be in there, correct?
Yeah. And so the particular thing I teach my clients is identity shifting is actually a homecoming. It's about removing the false ideas that we've collected from society and allowing yourself to shift to who you were meant to be. And that's where free will and fate come together in harmony. Because when we allow ourselves to be who we're meant to be, what we truly, truly want, most of the time, people don't even know what they truly want. They think they want money, but they don't want money. Like, if I told them, would you want money if you had to work 80 hours a week? No. Well, then you don't want money. You actually want freedom. So a lot of people don't quite know what they truly want. And it's being clouded by what they think they want. And they have these things that they think they want because society told them that they should want this in order to be accepted. Right? And these are the pendulums that keep us enslaved to their programs. And so it becomes very, very hard initially to break free. And, we got to do a lot of work to get you out of your comfort zone, to follow your own path and not be afraid to walk an uncharted terrain. Because for most people, it's uncertainty. Human beings, they fear uncertainty. You would take a certain path that is full of suffering rather than an uncertain path that you don't know is going to be full of suffering or the greatest pleasure that you can have. And that's what we see time and time again when people pursue the rat race. But then the select few have the courage to say, you know what? Nothing is worth this. I'm going to go the uncharted terrain. And that's when the spiritual journey begins. For me, this business, doing all of this is my spiritual journey. This is my karmic destiny. This is what I was meant to experience.
Hey there, Inspired Soul. Just taking out a quick sec to ask you today, what is your biggest takeaway from today's episode? I'd love to hear from you around the law of becoming, reality creation, identity shifting. Quazi's dropping wisdom bombs as he always does, left, right, and center. I'd love to hear from you. What are your biggest takeaways in the comments below? We'd love to get him back on in the future as well. So if you have any questions, also feel free to drop them in the comments below as well. And I'd be honored to ask them in the future when he comes back on. And with that, back to Quazi in today's episode. I can totally resonate because there's this element of spiritual entrepreneurship that just lights me up to the nth degree, because I just find business as, maybe it's a pendulum, but entrepreneurship as a construct, you literally, you get to see your energy mirrored back into, you've got an amazing team, there are people that are helping you, they're coalescing around a vision, and you're like, dude, this is actually happening. Like, I believe in something, and things that, and it's all powered by business, and you're like, whoa, this is really trippy. But for some people in the spiritual space, also business can be quite a trigger, because money's a bit of a trigger in the spiritual space as well.
It's only a trigger because of the pendulums.
Yeah, so it is a pendulum. Yeah.
Because they've been told that money is evil, only the rich people are evil.
Yeah.
And so they buy into that, and that's why they stay broke. That's the unfortunate reality.
Yeah.
If you can't, and also the Bible says, the camel and the needle, the chances the rich man will go to heaven is lower than you can put a camel through a needle. Something like that.
Yeah. We've done some really interesting conversations on biblical teachings as well, and certain parts of the Bible, which were the teachings of Christ, which were teachings from, the lawmakers at the time and stuff as well, that sort of made their way into the Bible and stuff as well.
Spanish Inquisition. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really interesting to dive in and weave into some of that stuff. Yeah, really quickly though, just while we're on the topic of authenticity, because you did mention free will, fate, free will, and and you actually, I really like the way you talk about it on your channel. There's inner intention and there's outer intention. That makes it easier to sort of reconcile for me anyway. Can you discuss a little bit around inner and outer intention? God's will, our will, God's will, our will, and how that potentially lives under the authenticity banner?
Yeah, so one of the deepest teachings or lessons that I learned this year was to be fully authentic. Authenticity is a moment-to-moment thing. What in one moment feels authentic may become completely inauthentic at another moment, and we have to give ourselves permission to be inconsistent. One of the things that ego despises is inconsistency bias, right? So we, by all means, try our best to appear consistent to everyone else. Otherwise, we're going to get cast away from the tribe for being a fucking weirdo. That's so the ego always tries to be consistent. But the reality is, today, it might feel really authentic for me to make YouTube videos. Tomorrow, it might not. And then I just don't do it. So in this moment, what is arising? Being true to what is arising in every single moment. And so my decision-making process completely changed, because I used to make decisions from logic, what's safe? What will lead to this? But now it's what feels right? The decision to come on this podcast. I haven't done a podcast in maybe a year, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 months, because nothing just resonated. But then when your team messaged, I was like, wow, this feels right. This feels right, and it feels like the right time. And so I said yes. So it's my decision making is okay, what feels like the right thing to do? That is authentic. So intention is, if we try to define intention, it's our resolve to have and to act. Inner intention is our resolve to fight, to act in order to get something, to do. Outer intention is that resolve to just have or to become one with, to be one with that thing. So if you're familiar with Florence Scovel Shinn or Neville Goddard talks about the law of assumption. The law of assumption is you live in the end, and then you act from the end. You be first, and then you do, and then the having will come. And so outer intention is a force that's beyond anything you could ever imagine. One touch of it, your wildest dreams will materialize. Things that were beyond your wildest imaginations will materialize. Inner intention is more of, I will fight against the world to get what I want. And so in that sense, it's like the conscious mind. The conscious mind is 5% of our whole psyche, or of our whole being. The subconscious, unconscious, and collective unconscious constitutes of 95% of our whole being. So that 95% is outer intention, when we become one with everything around us. And so when we tap into this intention that is a win-win situation, typically, when you focus on benefiting yourself and also benefiting the world around you, you tap into this force that kind of magically makes things happen. So that force can also be tapped into when you focus simply on, I have made this goal and I will have it. I don't care what needs to be done. I don't care how it happens, and I don't care when it happens. I have simply made the decision. I said I will have it. What's the problem? It'll happen. That's it. But inner intention has all these presuppositions like, oh, in order for this to happen, that should happen. In order for me to grow my business, I need to do this marketing funnel and run ads here, and then that needs to happen, and I need to get this many customers at this LTV, and all this needs to happen. So that's more inner intention. And don't get me wrong, all of your goals can be materialized with inner intention. A lot of people are doing that, and they're preaching hard work, grind till you burn out. That gets preached all the time.
Hustle.
But that's actually, hustle harder. That's, the way I look at it is, that's the easy way to do it. That's a guaranteed way. Like, you can do it. It's just not going to bring any fulfillment. I think the harder, more challenging way is, how can I have my cake and eat it too? How can I do nothing and have everything? That's something I've been thinking about. It's like, the most efficient way to achieve what you want is by letting it happen by itself. So when you focus on how your goals get manifested without your interference, you're actually using divine will or outer intention for it to happen. So when I think about my goals and I can conceive that somehow it just happens, somehow something happens and my ideal life gets manifested. And, a lot of the times people kind of fall into a trap with this because they think, oh, I'm just going to sit on my couch and try to manifest. This is more so for people who have the propensity to work hard, and their whole lives have worked hard and grinded really, really hard to achieve their goals. And that hasn't worked. And that's only led to more and more suffering, more and more lack of fulfillment. But if you're someone who hasn't achieved that, you kind of have to go full circle, right? It's like, in the beginning, you fetch wood, carry water, like the Buddha said. In the middle, you do all this crazy shit, and at the end, you fetch wood and you carry water. Like, after enlightenment, you fetch wood, carry water. So you have to go through that journey to arrive at that. And at the end, what I notice is, you stop thinking about all this shit a lot, and you just start actually being. But in the middle, you have to think about all of this. It has to be a conscious competence before it can become an unconscious competence.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm viscerally feeling the pain of, there's this Tim Ferriss quote that busyness is laziness. And it's just like searing into me right now as just echoing around everything you've just shared in terms of, it's because actually doing the work is the harder path in so many ways. It's like bringing that level of order of between our inner intention, outer intention, our own free will, God's will, and allowing ourselves to surrender to that with attention. So when we talk about the law of becoming, there are 3 core principles: authenticity. The next part is pendulums, which I feel like we've covered quite a bit at depth in today's episode. Then part 3, you talk about like, interestingly, you introduce it as kind of like all gas, all brakes. Like, can you tell us what you mean by that? Part 3 of the law of becoming.
Yeah. So a lot of the times in their resolve, when we talk about intention is the resolve to do and to have. Within that subsect of intention comes inner intention, the resolve to do, and outer intention, the resolve to have. The lack of concern of how it happens. When you have a very strong resolve, you're gas. You're all gas, no brakes. When you're half-hearted, you have a foot on the gas and a foot on the brakes. There's a great quote by Napoleon Hill which goes, "A weak plan executed with a definiteness of purpose will triumph over a strong plan executed with an indefiniteness of purpose." A weak plan executed with a definiteness of purpose, with a resoluteness of intention, will always triumph over a strong plan that is executed half-heartedly with brakes, half gas. And so it's crucial that whatever it is you do, you go all in. No half-heartedness, full resolve. Because what people fail to understand is, even if it is the wrong plan or the weak plan, your resolve will shift you to a different lifeline where you just fall into the right plan. Your resolve is what makes the shift between different lifelines happen, right? And resolve becomes strong when our hearts and our minds are together. When we think about the goal and we feel one with the goal. When our heart and minds are completely working with each other, this shift in lifelines happens. It's kind of like the observation principle in quantum physics. When you observe the event, it materializes. And the observation phenomenon occurs with heart and mind coherence. Yeah.
So lying underneath that, you've got the 4 pillars of identity, and actually shifting our identity. Because if we're going to go all in, we then need to like actually work with our identity, because so many of us have so many blocks in and around that space. The key place you always bring us to is awareness, and I think that's probably where I first started with your work in trying to dive in deeper and deeper into my own awareness. Amongst the 4 pillars, awareness. Can you speak to us of awareness? We've been discussing quite a bit and probably in and around that, but can you tie it into the pillars of identity shifting?
Yeah, so in order to complete this process of identity shifting, we teach this to our clients in our reality mastery program. There's 4 pillars. There's awareness, clarity, creation, and coordination. Awareness is the fundamental step, because when we tap into a certain level of awareness, we start to realize that this current identity or persona that we're embodying is a mask that we're wearing. However, when we take off that mask, there is a formless awareness that exists beyond the mask. But until that realization occurs, there is no potential in shifting your identity. There is no potential at all, because this mask has been put on unconsciously, and it will always direct our lives, and we'll call it fate. So cultivating a certain level of awareness is in realizing that there is this I am beyond Quazi's a son, Quazi's a husband, Quazi's a father, Quazi's a business owner, Quazi's an employer. Beyond it all, beyond Quazi, what is there? Who am I? Who is there? So that is the goal. Like, one of the main goals is to look at the character. Once we keep looking at the character, now naturally a separation happens between the observed and the observer. When that happens, now there's a potential to define what is wanted next. So once we've reached that transparency, now we can shift the focus on from what is unwanted to what is wanted. So that's when pillar 2 comes in clarity. We define clearly 3 things. What do you want? Why do you want it? And who must you become in order to effortlessly accomplish that? What, why, and who? Intellectual clarity, emotional clarity, identity level clarity. Heart, mind, heart, and soul, or you want to call it the persona that we want to embody. When the what, why, and who are congruent, are aligned, the how and when shows up by itself.
I just want to jump in there. I know it's completely inappropriate me to do so, but if it's okay, because we've got awareness and we've got clarity, and in the I am, we're this completely blank slate. And for many people, the idea of there being desire and then wants, which is what we're trying to get clear on in step 2, is kind of like, oh, I'm meant to be desireless because I'm spiritual, I'm transparent. But I think it's worth me just building a bridge there between the two, because the universe is looking in on itself. It is desiring to have, there is a desire that is the universe's desire. There is like a sacred desire. We've been discussing pendulums and stuff like this up until this point, which is desire hijacked, if you will, right? Like corrupted desire. But there is like a sacred desire, is there not? Touch wood. And yeah, I just wanted to sort of introduce that as a bridge between awareness and clarity as you're discussing, what do I want? Why do I want it? Who must I become? The key thing in there is, it's not, again, just reminding people that it's not clicking into what do I want based on what I've been conditioned to want.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Sorry, just wanted to chuck
that
in there.
that's a really good point too. Is like, desirelessness is not the goal. The goal is to become aware of what is desired and not to interfere with it, not to get in its way. Because otherwise, you'll always act against yourself and you're going to create more karma, right? So this karmic destiny, it needs to be played out. And so the goal is to become one with what is authentic, who we were meant to be. And so that's what clarity is, to find out, to get really, really intellectually, emotionally, and identity level clear on who we were meant to be, what we have come to experience. And then the awareness is what simply watches that play happen. This drama, this game of life happen. Only stepping down as little as possible, because we don't want to create disturbance in the game. That's the second pillar, clarity.
Thank you.
Yeah, third pillar is creation. We teach our clients like methods, visualization methods, affirmations, and how to step by step create that life every single day. And we particularly utilize two main models of reality: the mirror model of reality, the mirror principle, and the film and script model, to create different shifts and lifelines. And so shifting to that lifeline where you are your authentic self and you're achieving what you were meant to achieve, that makes your life a continual vacation. The goal is always, what makes my life a continual vacation? Right? Because we want to...
I love that. Yeah.
Because like a lot of people think, oh, I got to work hard. But then even that word, work hard, has connotations of doing something that I'm acting against myself doing. When you play a game, you don't say I'm working hard, even though you are inherently working hard, but you don't say work hard. It just, like, to people that, like, when I hear work hard, I'm like, oh, that fucking sucks.
Yeah, even the word work, bro, like from physics, it's like force over distance, force times by distance. And you're like, force, like, you can just power, right? We were talking about that earlier.
That's exactly it. Like, it's not work, it's play. If I'm playing, I don't want to go to sleep. And when I go to sleep, I want to wake up because it's so much fun. That's all I want to do all day, right? So teaching people, like, get to that state of, you can play and you can still have everything you want, and you can have your cake and eat it too, without needing to suffer, without needing to sell your soul or sacrifice a part of yourself. You can be whole and complete and exist like that, and you'll be happy with your life. You might have to give up some things that are egoically desired, but you will never regret it. You will never, ever regret it. So that's where, creation teaches you how to make that happen step by step. And the final part of it is coordination.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to ask you to share the mirror principle a little bit, but then, maybe we can come back to that later. Sorry, really, I'm interrupting you a lot. I'm just way too comfortable with you. I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. The mirror principle is really, really deep, because the fundamental principle of the mirror is, my attitude. Reality is a mirror that reflects your attitude to it with a delay. So whatever attitude I have to myself and to the world outside of me is what gets reflected. So I present an image to the mirror of reality with my attitude. And my attitude is my thought and my feeling towards something. So for example, if I believe now is a really bad time to start a business, the mirror of reality will say, great, now is a terrible time to start a business. You're right. But if I say, now is a wonderful time to start a business, the mirror of reality will say, great, you're right. Now is actually a wonderful time to start a business. It's very neutral. It just reflects what the image you present to it. But it happens with a slight delay. And the delay is dependent on the complexity of your goal based on your current lifeline. So for example, if you are someone who, you make $100,000 a year and you're trying to manifest $100 here and there, it's going to be very easy for you to manifest that. But if you make $100,000 and you want to manifest $1 million, that's going to take a little bit of time. You need to work with that intention and that resolve. You need to stay with that resolve for longer and longer until you shift two lifelines that make that $1 million happen. Now, it could happen instantaneously. There is no reason why it couldn't, but that is also dependent on different factors, like how willing you are to accept and believe that it's a reality, right? If you can accept that it can be a reality tomorrow, the likelihood that it can be a reality tomorrow is significantly higher, as opposed to if you believe and you have certain ideas about when it could happen. And so the best thing to do is simply say, I will have it. I don't care when it happens. I don't care how it happens. It is possible. And the more you keep working with it, the easier it becomes to conceive that it can be a reality. 7 years ago, when I started visualizing my ideal life, never did I imagine that I would be here today, running a company, doing like $1.5 million, $2 million a year, sharing my message with people and working less than 10 hours a week on the thing that I love. You know, this is beyond my wildest dreams. And so that's what can happen if you give yourself permission to be who you were meant to be. The goals that you'll achieve are going to be beyond what you could have conceived. Right? So that's the mirror principle.
One of the sorry to just keep dragging it out, but one of the things in there is, I probably shouldn't even apologize, but the stress piece is so insidious there. Like, I just want to highlight that because so many of us are walking around with stress, like deflated, like trying to achieve things. And what you said is your attitude actually dictates what you call in, what you attract, what you become with a slight delay. And if you're walking around in a state of like begrudgingness, like if things aren't working out and you're stressed about it, I know it's very difficult to shift this when you're in it because you've got like biological symptoms, triggers, markers, your nervous system is triggered and wired a certain way. But nonetheless, like that's actually calling in more down the line of what you're actually trying to mitigate through the response, like through the stress response. Like it's like a gas valve that you're trying to like let off some pressure out of, and you're like worry, stress, but then like actually you're calling in more of that down the line, right? That's also what I heard in the shadow aspect of what you just described.
There's a lot of different factors that contributes to that. There's also physiological stuff like
touch wood
that contributes to your feelings of stress. But a lot of the times what unfortunately happens is people are just trained to think like that. We've just become trained to express dissatisfaction and to expect the worst because then we won't be disappointed, right? So we are afraid to be vulnerable and say, you know what? I actually do want money. You know what? I actually do want to be rich. You know what? I deserve to be rich. You know, like people are afraid to think that because church taught me that being rich is evil. My parents taught me this. My society taught me this. We don't give ourselves permission to have what we truly want. Because unless that happens, there is no possibility for goal achievement. Like it's not just going to magically fall in your lap without you. I mean, it could, but you'll never be able to maintain it. That's why so many, what's the statistics? 80% of lottery winners go broke within the first 3 years.
Yeah, crazy.
They can't keep it, right? It's not about how much you make, it's about how much you keep. And that keeping, the lack of self-sabotage is only the effect of who you've become. If you've become the kind of person who is worthy and deserving of that money, you'll find a way to keep it and compound it.
Yes. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Coordination, step 4, please guide us.
Coordination. So that's actually, it leads well into coordination because coordination is about staying as the ideal self, who you've chosen to become, how to coordinate through the challenges, because within the first 40 to 60 days, that's the most crucial period of when you make a new intention. You're going to see a lot of tests and challenges are going to come up because you've made a new intention. If you didn't have any desires or any goals, I mean, you're going to have desires, but if you just simply wanted to stay as you are, you'd have the most comfortable life, right? You'd stay as you are, best case. Worst case, you'd get fired from your job or lose all your money. That's typically how it happens. But you wouldn't suffer. You wouldn't face challenges or tests, at least not that many, as opposed to if you wanted to level up and grow. Because when you make a new intention, life really wants to see if your intention is strong enough because it wants to give you what you want. Now, a lot of people say like, oh, that's a limiting belief. I don't know. I just speak from experience. Every time I've made a new intention, I have experienced tests. Maybe that's because it's what I believe. I'm okay with that.
I actually feel the same. I set an intention every year and I say to my clients now, and you're right, maybe it is a limiting belief, but for the first 6 months of the year almost, I see the shadow aspect of the intention show up first before the breakthrough of the intention actually happens. And I get nervous now setting intentions. Just like, I shouldn't say that. Like I've like, obviously there's like an intention. It's like, oh, beautiful. Like, the coming year is all about rest and recharge for me. So I'm super into it, right? I'm like, beautiful. And it's like, oh crap, the first half's going to be kind of frantic, maybe.
Yeah. Well, it's now my attitude is whatever it is, I trust in myself to deal with it. And I trust that God will take care of me. And that's also part of the mirror principle, which is what is your attitude to yourself and your attitude to reality? Is God taking care of you? Is reality taking care of you? Are you capable of, showing up, or like do you trust yourself that you are good enough to be deserving of that thing? So self-view, worldview comes together to form this whole identity. So going back to coordination, we teach our clients methods like surrender and letting go on how to let go of that old self that keeps rearing its ugly head, so that you can stay as the ideal self and not fall back to your old ways and that old version of yourself. And that completes the identity shifting, the 4 pillars to identity shifting.
Oh, Quazi. Yeah, man. For those that do want to dive deeper, you're talking about this and so much more. But for people who wanted to dive in, I know you've got coaching programs and stuff like that you facilitate for people to work their way through. But the easiest place for people to connect to your work is actually probably, like, I get a lot from your YouTube channel. Is that a fair place to point people?
Yeah, 100%. If you just go to YouTube and search my name, Quazi Johir, you'll find my channel.
Cool. I'll definitely put a link to that in the description below. One of the interesting things I heard you speak to somewhere along my journey was, just ironing out. And these are those 1% tweaks that, like I was talking about earlier. Like, we talk about, like Abraham Hicks is like, just imagine, and it'll come. Whereas I find your approach to be quite, the way I picked it up from you was, yes, absolutely, imagination is totally your responsibility and to step into that. And the best way, because then other people are like, oh, just hustle and take a bunch of action, right? So there's like that binary ones and zeros. And like you were alluding to the gray space before, one of the big things I've taken away from your work was absolutely imagine. But then also the best way to let the universe know that you're all in is by taking constructive steps and action. And that like affirms the path and the process forward. I just would love to hear that from your own words for our audience, because that's been huge for me, bro.
Yeah, so I realized this when I realized that life isn't black or white. It's not action or no action. Why not both? Why not inner intention and outer intention? Because inner intention will absolutely get you there. Outer intention is just unpredictable to work with because it shows up in its own time. But with inner intention, you can make progress towards it. But the goal really is to unite your inner intention with the intention that doesn't fully belong to you, the God intention, divine intention, outer intention. So with inner intention, we're constantly reminding ourselves that we are one with the universe, and we just put one foot in front of the other. While it's like you distract the monkey while God makes beautiful things happen. Now, if I was sitting there and not doing anything, just waiting for my goal to show up, what would happen? My importance level, my attachment would go sky high. Because action is what dissipates importance. When I take action and get so process-oriented, I'm just having fun every single day, I forget about the goal. I forget about it. And when you forget about the goal, that's when the goal happens. That's when it manifests. So in a way, this inner intention, this play, the most efficient way to do it is to have fun every single day making progress, ideally making progress on the thing that you actually want to make progress towards. Make it a really fun game. And you forget about the outcome because you're working on these projects, you're creating you're creating art, you're an artist. Every scientist is also an artist. They're creating art through their publications, through their discoveries, through their hypothesis, through everything they're coming up with. It's just we have a different way of expressing our art. We're all reality creators, so we have creations of our own. And so we have different ways of expressing this art. And you'll find you're the most fulfilled when basically like you're creating art every single day. So for me, my art form is content, creating videos and expressing and sharing my ideas with many people. For other people, it could legit be painting and sharing it with the world. Others could be music. So what is your art that you lose yourself in that you could do for free for the rest of your life? And that's what I've always asked myself, like, hey, what could I do for free for the rest of my life? Once I've figured that out, then I can ask, how can I monetize this? The monetization question is second. The what could I do for free for the rest of my life is first.
I wanted to ask you a question about karma, because in some ways, karma can act as a bit of a blueprint for what we might lack or crave in this particular lifetime. And also you mentioned, I'm not sure if it's connected to pendulums in some way, but yeah, like how do we know if we're accruing karmic debt or actually if we're working through karma? Have you contemplated this to some degree? And how do you...
From what I've realized is, for normal people, there is good karma and bad karma. For the serious spiritual seeker, there is no karma and karma. They don't care about good or bad karma. Any karma is bad. Even if it's good, they're not interested in it. They just want no karma. And so, if you want a wonderful life, you accumulate good karma. And you do it through positive actions, helping others, doing good things, living true to yourself. If you want no karma, you take the path of typically renunciation, of watching, of observing, of letting things play out instead of interfering, because any kind of interference on my part creates more karma. And so when I look at things that bring me pleasure or pursuing in the pursuit of goals, if I am being authentic and true to myself instead of, you can just feel it. Like if I buy something out of an impulse, if I'm doing something compulsively, it is creating karma. If I'm doing something consciously and deliberately and I don't get that dopamine spike from doing it, it's actually not building karma. That's at least what I understand. And again, these are all energetics. There's nothing set in stone, that you can track and see, like, what's my karma meter today? It's more so like, if whatever I do, I want to do it consciously and deliberately. Even if it is a dopamine-inducing activity, like drinking a cup of coffee, like, I want to get some caffeine in my system. If I'm doing it unconsciously, I'm building karma. If I'm doing it consciously and I'm enjoying every single sip of that cup of coffee, chances are I'm actually burning karma. Yeah, anything done consciously in full awareness and full observation that this is happening tends to burn karma, and anything done compulsively tends to build more karma.
Brilliant, because along this podcast you have been calling out the wealth versus spirituality paradigm quite a bit, and just people believing that money isn't necessarily a spiritual pursuit, and almost seeing wealth as something lesser. I just wanted to give you a moment here towards the end of the podcast to just explicitly speak to that, because I believe there's a bit of a mindset shift that towards money that needs to be embraced as it being a neutral or even a positive force. I remember, and I speak from a place of intimately being in that space of feeling like humble kind of meant poor, to be honest. And humility is a massive part, like a massive thing for me on my spiritual path, right? Touchwood is like humility is like a key tenet. But humility and poor don't necessarily mean the same thing. And I'll even double click on that a little bit, is there were forces within me at certain points that were pushing to like, dare you not be humble. Yeah. And like, if you can feel the energy of that. And that was very much my vibe and frequency for a while there. And I remember being deep in a meditative process at some point. I was like, what is pushing that? And I remember looking all the way back up the link and kind of going, that's my ego pushing for humility.
Yeah.
But that's just another ego trap. and I was just like, wow, like that is a force and it's not a power, And I realized, wow, power is just like, it's taking a moment to just kind of go, in humility, it's like creation is, life is, it's the humility to accept every cell, not force yourself to be humble. Like,
yes,
be humble through awe and like, like, dude, we're alive. We're like, as Joe Rogan, space monkeys, like floating around on this rock around the sun. Like, what's going on here? Like, are you legit right now? Yeah. And there's enough, like, so that was this really profound piece.
Yeah.
And in a similar vein, it was like, that consistently pushing to like, if you're going to be spiritual, there was this pushing, like, if you're going to be spiritual, you're going to need to like not embrace. And even just touch wood, like watching the shift, like as the podcast has grown, as being able to coach and support more people through the podcast and the Inspired Evolution coaching, watching the impact that's possible. Like some of the people that I get to coach, I'm just in awe of. And just watching that, it's like, the more money that comes into the ecosystem, the more, like, I don't want to sound good, I put good in air quotes, that can be done. And so now it's like it's not like I'm hungry for the money, but it's like I appreciate it so much for what it actually, I see it as a capacitator. It just like, does so much. I've spoken a lot. Your thoughts on clearing out that?
No, that's really good. One quote I heard from Carl Jung is that I found really powerful. He was asked a question, and he said, "I would rather be whole than be good." And the other thing I've heard from Sadhguru, he talks about this, is good people suffer more than bad people because good people suffer their own conscience. So in my life, when I realized that, I realized that, hey, I can't try to be good anymore. I need to be real. I need to be real to what is. And when I'm real and I'm going through this path and evolving in my spiritual journey, I will arrive at goodness naturally. There will be you will realize that goodness, benefit of the world, power, is the most, it's the best place to be. Everything else will naturally cause harm to you. But you can, there's two different energies through which you can arrive at this. One is the ego, like you described, like, oh, I better be good, otherwise God will punish me. Or you could arrive at it from, this is just the most efficient and best place to be. Everything else is just not ideal. So when we go to that argument of wealth is evil, spirituality is good, a lot of people try to again skip steps. And I was like that. I believe rich people were evil. And I believe that because it allowed me to be in my cocoon, my comfort shell, and say, at least I don't need to put myself out there and go in the pursuit of money, when deep down that's actually what I really wanted. Right? Like I'll just be this like quiet scientist and be humble, and I'll show them rich folks that I can, create something great and I don't need money. I'll just live poorly. But that's not what my soul really wanted. Right? So I told myself this because it kept me comfortable. And I think a lot of people who don't have money, it's very easy to do it because then you don't have to put yourself out there. You don't have to keep yourself accountable to make money, to make things happen for yourself. But I think it's really genuine when people who do have money and they've made a ton of money, they say, okay, I've done the money. It's actually not brought me any more fulfillment. Like past this level, it hasn't really changed my life. So there's really there's no point. Like I'm seeking the infinite, but I'm seeking it in finite places. I'm looking for more zeros in my bank account. I'm trying to go from 1 million to 2 million to 3 million. These are all finite numbers. But what I'm seeking for, what my soul thirsts for is the infinite. And when you arrive, it's better to, instead of forcing yourself, like you said, to a realization, to arrive at it. And so we tell our clients like, hey, fill up your cup first. Be selfish. Fill up your cup first so much that it overflows and fills up the cups of others. Not leave yours empty and then fill up others. Because, Maslow's hierarchy, at the lowest level is survival. You can't skip steps. People try to skip steps. People try to take shortcuts. And I know that because I tried that and it didn't work. And so then you eat the humble pie, right? You have no choice. Like this is my journey now. I can't compare myself to someone who's on day 3005 when I'm on day 1. So, yeah.
Quazi. Oh, brother man, if I can say that with affection. Man, thank you so much for sharing yourself so abundantly here today. And, I get to say that to you, but also I've been following your content for the longest while, receiving your emails for the longest while. So much of, your work has inspired me along on my journey, on my path as well. And it's not just me, so many incredible people that I know, like Brian Scott, and fellow podcaster, incredible creator, loves your work as well. There's just so much love for your work, yes, who you are and what you do, but also who you are, brother. Just so much gratitude for you and the being and what you're up to in the world. And congrats again on your little son and on all the cool things happening in your world. And yeah, thank you again for doing this with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, man. This was wonderful.
Yo, inspired soul, you made it through to the end of another incredible episode. Thank you so much for your inspirations to evolve. It is such an honor to be your brother walking this path by your epic side. Now, I just want to take a quick moment to thank all of you that are subscribed to the channel. Thank you so much for your incredible love, your support. Everything we're doing around here is truly powered and empowered by your subscription to the channel. Thank you so, so, so much. And to all of you that haven't yet subscribed, please do take a moment as I'm saying the word subscribe. The subscribe button is lighting up in the colors of the inspired evolution below. So please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification icon. It helps with everything we're doing around here, promoting love, positivity, and wisdom around the planet. Thank you so much for your incredible support. On screen now, an opportunity for you to continue your inspirations to evolve. An episode with Dr. Bruce Lipton on how to reprogram your mind on epigenetics. He's the father of epigenetics. So I'm going to pop that one just here. If you haven't yet subscribed, my face is going to pop on screen. That's the icon of the channel for you to click on and hit subscribe. And also another couple of episodes on screen that YouTube has determined are probably most to your liking to inspire your evolution onwards, upwards, and inwards. So go on, take your pick, make your click, and I'll see you in the next one. See you there.